Welcome again. Our next project is to make a dinner plate. I think the biggest mistake that beginners make is they just don't start with enough clay. A lot of students like to just flatten it out. They don't leave enough for the rim. It tends to warp, it tends to crack. So for a stoneware dinner plate that I'm going to open up and be pretty close to the edge on a 12-inch bat, I'm going to use 4.5 pounds of clay. And when it'll shrink about 1.5 inches. It'll shrink down to about 10.5 inches. So let's get started. When you first make the plate, you think, boy, 4.5 pounds, that's a lot of clay. That's going to be a heavy plate. Obviously, some of the water evaporates and we're going to be trimming some away. But when we very first open up this clay and flatten it out to the edge of the bat, we can double check and see how thick it is. And then the next thing we'll do is we're just going to compress the clay. I like to run back and forth with the sponge. And then we're going to compress with the rib. And once you've compressed that clay, more often than not, you have to be careful that it isn't already too thin. You can thin it out pretty quickly. So what we're going to end up with is about that 1/2 inch thickness for the base so that we have enough to be able to trim. I like to trim a traditional foot on a plate. So we don't want it to get any less than 1/2 inch. So we're going to go ahead and get the clay centered. Get it coned up, and then we're going to push it down. So we like to make sure that we get it centered, just like we're doing for vases. And then we just want to keep flattening it out and keep centering it as we go. So once again, I like to rotate my hand towards me. And just flatten. And then flatten again. So I'm going to stop about 1/2 inch short of the edge of the bat. When I bring it up and lay the rim out, then we'll be out about 12 inches. So here's where we're going to just compress. See, so let's just double check. Right now, we're at about that 1/2 inch. We want to be careful that we don't take any more out than that. So the other thing that as I'm compressing, I was just kind of leading out and just making sure that we've got a nice bead out here on the edge. Is what we're going to be using for the rim. So just run back and forth a few times to compress the clay with the sponge, and then to be able to do that with the rib. Okay, so now to be very careful with what we have out here for the rim, we want to be careful that we don't dig down, that the plate doesn't come across and then dig and then come up. So just very carefully, we're just going to get from underneath And we're just going to make sure that we can bring that up without dipping down in right at this juncture here. So we've got it flat across. And now we can take a little bit of that thickness, and we're going to go ahead and bring that up. And then I like to just, once again, compress and smooth with the rib, and then just let that rounded corner come over and about halfway up. That's going to define where the edge comes over and then where we're going to lay the rim out. So, before I lay the rim out, while it's very easy for me to see and find, I'm going to go ahead and make my little V cut so that I have a spot for the wire. Then we can slow down a little bit. The other thing I'm going to make sure that I have is plenty of moisture here on the outside. So I'm going to use the squared edge of the rib with my right hand. My left hand is going to be holding from underneath. And we're just going to lay that rim out. And when we lay it out, we're going to leave it at about a 45-degree angle. If you keep going till it's flat, it'll probably want to keep going. So we're going to leave that at a little bit of an angle. And now I like to come back in, and right where this edge meets the rim, I like that edge right there to be nice and crisp. So I'm just going to get rid of a little of that slip so that you can see. Just get that nice crisp edge there. Okay, so we're going to just round the rim just a little bit. Okay, I often like to put a little oxide design on a lot of my plates. So I've just got some red iron oxide, and we're just going to do a little sgraffito design. So once again, I just use the shaft on my needle tool. And I'm just going to create some borders. And then we'll just take the rib, get it nice and clean. Then we'll just start moving closer, and just however you're flicking your wrist, is going to determine the kind of design that you're going to end up with. So they're never alike, but a little variety is a good thing. Okay, so here we are again on a 12-inch plate. I've got enough room that if I hold this wire very tight right against that bat, we can cut that off. Otherwise, it would just take a really long time. It would have to be almost, very hard leather hard before it would pop off of the bat. And I'm thinking it would have a greater chance of cracking if it was just left on there. Now it has a chance to shrink and move away from the bat. Okay, so here's the one that we threw yesterday. And we're going to use the foam bat again. Okay, so I like these to be good and leather hard. I don't want to pick this up and have it have it warp, because obviously clay has a memory, and if it warps, it'll probably want to warp again during the firing. So this is a nice stiff leather hard. So now we can take this and line this up with our rings. Okay, so with the amount of clay that we started with, I can come in here and I can get a nice edge. And then we can do like we did with the bowls. There's actually enough clay that we can come down and we can create that division between the side wall and the foot. I don't think you need much more than half an inch. I mean, there's lots of different types of feet that you could put on a plate. So once again, I'm going to give my little bevel on the inside. And then just to burnish and round off. Okay, and now once again I like to create some borders, which would be where the dry foot would be for my glazing, and then also maybe just to put another one in here just to create a nice edge. And now that we do have this thinned down, now that it's thinner, if I pick it up again, I could still warp it. So you might as well just be a little cautious, and we'll just do the old upside down cake. Rather than try and pick the pot up, we'll just go like that, and that way we know we're not distorting it or changing the edge any. Okay, there's our dinner plate. We'll see you back here for the next one.